You know that feeling when you discover your favorite movie star was actually a nightmare behind the scenes? Well, buckle up, because we're about to take a journey through Hollywood's most beautiful secrets. And trust me, some of these stories will make you see your favorite classic films in a completely different light. Hollywood's golden age gave us some of cinema's most unforgettable faces and performances. Those dazzling lights, perfect smiles, and carefully crafted public images created legends that still captivate us today. But you know what they say about never meeting your heroes. Well, in this case, you might not have wanted to work with them either. Behind those flawless facades lived some of entertainment's most notoriously difficult personalities. We're talking about women whose off-screen behavior shocked even their toughest colleagues. From legendary feuds that shut down entire productions to bitter rivalries that lasted decades, these leading ladies were known for conduct that ranged from petty mind games to career-destroying vendettas. Today, we're pulling back that velvet curtain on Hollywood's most challenging stars. These are the women whose explosive outbursts, jealous schemes, and calculated tactics earned them reputations as the most feared figures in the film industry. This is the story of Hollywood's golden age, the parts they definitely didn't put in the publicity photos. 27. Judy Garland, the Damaged Destroyer. You know Judy Garland's tragic story, MGM's horrific treatment of her as a child star, the constant battles with addiction, and her heartbreaking early passing. Born Frances Gumm to parents who pushed her and her sisters into vaudeville as children, Garland never got to experience a normal childhood. Her mother was giving her stimulants to keep her energetic for performances and sleeping pills to help her rest, starting her lifelong struggle with substance dependency before she was even 10 years old. But here's what most people don't know. While Garland was certainly a victim of Hollywood's cruelty, those who worked closely with her described what one colleague called the most devastatingly cruel woman in an industry known for cruelty. Her difficult behavior went far beyond her traumatic experiences and substance issues, particularly toward those she perceived as having the normal childhood and stable mental health that she'd been denied. In her moments of sobriety and clarity, Garland showed extraordinary empathy and generosity. She'd give away her entire salary to crew members in financial trouble and spend hours comforting anyone who was struggling emotionally. Friends noted that she seemed to genuinely hate herself for the cruelty she displayed during her darkest periods. Her treatment of other performers revealed a pattern of deliberate sabotage. If another singer or actress received positive attention, Garland would deploy what co-star Margaret Hamilton called psychological warfare, deliberately upstaging them during performances, spreading rumors about unprofessional behavior, or using her considerable influence to have their roles reduced. The trauma that most shaped Garland's destructive behavior was realizing, as an adult, that her mother had essentially sold her childhood for money and fame. This betrayal by the person who should have protected her created a deep mistrust of everyone's motives and a belief that she had to destroy others before they destroyed her. Garland reserved particular venom for young performers who reminded her of her younger self. When introduced to newcomers with similar backgrounds, she'd initially appear supportive, then systematically undermine their confidence through casual comments about their weight, talent, or prospects in the industry. Several promising careers stalled after encountering Garland's targeted cruelty. 26. Joan Crawford, the calculated career destroyer. Joan Crawford's reputation for cruelty has become Hollywood legend, amplified by her daughter Christina's memoir, Mommy Dearest. Born Lucille LeSueur to an unmarried teenager in Texas, Crawford's early life was marked by poverty, abandonment, and abuse. She was shuffled between relatives and worked as a laundress and waitress before dancing her way to Hollywood, learning that survival required ruthless ambition. But beyond the wire hanger incidents and domestic abuse lies a pattern of calculated professional cruelty that made Crawford one of the most feared women in the industry for decades. Crawford's approach to rivals was systematic and devastating. When she perceived another actress as a threat, she'd deploy a comprehensive strategy that began with gathering information through her network of informants, then progressed to a coordinated campaign of professional sabotage. In a surprising contradiction, Crawford was known for her quiet, charity work, particularly supporting single mothers and their children. She anonymously funded daycare centers and provided scholarships for children of struggling families, perhaps trying to give others the stability she never had. Her treatment of co-stars who received positive attention became legendary. During filming of The Women, Crawford deliberately stepped on Norma Shearer's lines, moved during Shearer's close-ups to ruin takes, and engaged in a whisper campaign suggesting Shearer was having difficulty remembering her dialogue. The moment that crystallized Crawford's ruthless approach came when MGM's studio head, Louis B. Mayer, told her she was too common for leading roles. From that day forward, she decided to become so powerful that no one could ever dismiss her again, writing in her diary, "They think I'm common? I'll show them what common can accomplish." Crawford reserved particular cruelty for actresses she mentored. She'd invite promising newcomers to her home, lavishing them with advice and seemingly supportive guidance. Once she gained their trust, the manipulation began, advice designed to damage their careers, introductions to people who would exploit them, and the collection of compromising information to use as future leverage. 25. Bette Davis, the calculated terror. While often remembered today as a feminist icon who fought the studio system, Bette Davis earned a well-documented reputation as one of Hollywood's most deliberately difficult stars, particularly toward actresses she viewed as rivals or incompetent. Born to a mother who abandoned her father when Davis was just 10, she learned that success required absolute self-reliance. Her mother's constant criticism and emotional distance taught Davis that showing vulnerability was dangerous. Davis's calculated cruelty was most evident in her treatment of co-stars she didn't respect. During filming of Beyond the Forest, she was so dismissive of her leading man, Joseph Cotten, that director King Vidor had to repeatedly ask her to stop rolling her eyes during Cotton's close-ups. Surprisingly, Davis was known for her secret acts of generosity. She quietly established a fund for aging character actors who had fallen on hard times, and during World War II, she organized the famous Hollywood Canteen, where stars entertained troops. When a young extra was fired for missing work due to her sick child, Davis rehired her under a different name. On the set of All About Eve, Davis tormented a young Marilyn Monroe, whom she considered an untalented starlet. Davis would loudly criticize Monroe's acting ability and deliberately destroy takes by making mistakes whenever Monroe performed well, forcing the less experienced actress to repeat emotionally draining scenes. The moment that crystallized Davis's approach to Hollywood came when Jack Warner told her she was too ugly for leading roles. From that day forward, she decided to become so formidable that no one would dare dismiss her again, writing to her sister, "If I can't be beautiful, I'll be unforgettable." Her most infamous act of on-set cruelty came during Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where her decades-long feud with Joan Crawford reached new heights. Davis reportedly installed a Coca-Cola machine on set, knowing Crawford's late husband had been the CEO of Pepsi. 24. Marlene Dietrich, the Tutonic Terror. Marlene Dietrich's legendary status as a Hollywood icon and later anti-Nazi activist has somewhat obscured her reputation as one of the industry's most calculatingly cruel figures, both on set and in her personal relationships. Born in Berlin to a strict Prussian military family, Dietrich learned early that showing weakness invited punishment. Her father's passing when she was young, and her mother's emotional coldness taught her that survival required becoming invulnerable to others' opinions or needs. Dietrich's perfectionism manifested as deliberate humiliation of those she considered professionally inferior. She would halt production to publicly criticize makeup artists, costume designers, or lighting technicians, often reducing them to tears before an entire crew. Her tirades weren't spontaneous outbursts, but methodical dissections designed to establish total dominance over the production environment. Despite her reputation for coldness, Dietrich risked her life and career to help Jewish refugees escape Nazi Germany, often using her own money and connections. She also secretly supported the families of German resistance fighters throughout the war, never seeking recognition for these dangerous acts of courage. Her treatment of romantic partners, both male and female, revealed a pattern of emotional sadism. Multiple lovers described Dietrich deliberately cultivating their emotional dependence, then suddenly withdrawing affection, or publicly flirting with others to create psychological distress. The defining moment in Dietrich's emotional development came when her first love, a young actor, left her for someone more traditionally feminine. This rejection of her androgynous nature led her to weaponize both her masculine and feminine qualities, using them to manipulate others while protecting herself from similar vulnerability. 23rd, Mae West, the queen of double entendra's dark side. Mae West revolutionized Hollywood with her frank approach to intimacy and witty one-liners, but behind her liberated persona was a woman whose cruelty was as sharp as her wit. Born in Brooklyn to a mother who was ahead of her time in women's rights and a father who was largely absent, West learned that power came from controlling attraction and using it to manipulate others. Despite her reputation for liberation, West was remarkably traditional in her personal relationships, often supporting the same man for decades and quietly caring for family members who fell on hard times. West's cruelty was most evident in her treatment of other women, whom she viewed as competition. In a world where female appeal was tightly controlled, she would deliberately humiliate actresses who tried to emulate her style, often making cutting remarks about their appearance or romantic appeal in front of industry executives. The source of West's competitive nature with women traced to her childhood, where she competed with her mother for her father's attention. This early dynamic taught her that women were natural enemies rather than potential allies. Her professional behavior included systematically rewriting scripts to minimize other female characters' importance while expanding her own role. She would also insist on costume and lighting choices that made her co-stars look inferior while enhancing her own appearance. 22. Vivien Leigh, The Perfectionist's painful legacy. Vivien Leigh created two of cinema's most iconic characters in Scarlett O'Hara and Blanche DuBois, but her off-screen behavior was often as dramatic as these fictional roles. Born in British India and sent away to boarding school at age 6, Leigh developed an early fear of abandonment that would plague her throughout life. The separation from her parents at such a young age left her with a desperate need for control and perfection. While her struggle with bipolar disorder explains some of her volatility, colleagues described a deliberate cruelty that went beyond mental health challenges. Leigh's perfectionistic standards led to notorious conflicts with directors and co-stars. During the filming of Gone with the Wind, she would deliberately sabotage scenes if she felt they weren't meeting her exacting standards, forcing exhausted cast and crew to repeat physically demanding sequences numerous times. In her private moments of lucidity between episodes, Leigh was known for her extraordinary kindness. She regularly sent anonymous care packages to aging British actors in need and personally nursed several friends through serious illnesses. Her psychiatrist noted that she seemed to suffer more during her stable periods, when she fully comprehended the pain she had caused others. Her treatment of supporting actresses was particularly harsh. Olivia de Havilland, who played Melanie in Gone with the Wind, recalled Leigh deliberately stepping on her hand during a scene where de Havilland was lying down, then smiling when de Havilland cried out in pain. The tragic irony of Leigh's perfectionism was revealed in her private letters to her doctor, where she wrote, "I demand perfection from others because I can never achieve it myself. Every performance feels like a beautiful lie I'm telling, and I punish everyone around me for believing it." 21. Rita Hayworth, The Love Goddess's Curse. Rita Hayworth became the ultimate pin-up girl of the 1940s, but behind her sultry screen image lay one of Hollywood's most tragic figures. Born Margarita Cancino to a Spanish dancer who forced her to perform in adult nightclubs from age 12, Hayworth endured years of inappropriate treatment from her father and was essentially sold to older men in the entertainment industry before she was legally an adult. Her transformation from dark-haired Margarita to red-headed Rita involved a painful electrolysis to raise her hairline and constant pressure to deny her Hispanic heritage, creating a profound identity crisis that lasted her entire life. Despite her glamorous image, Hayworth was known for her kindness to extras and crew members, often inviting lonely cast members to join her for meals and remembering the birthdays of people others ignored. She once said, "The only real happiness I've found is in making other people feel less alone." Hayworth's cruelty manifested primarily toward herself and those who tried to help her. She would sabotage relationships with kind men, believing she didn't deserve love, while gravitating toward abusive partners who confirmed her negative self-image. The cruelest irony of Hayworth's life was that her beauty, which made her famous, also became her prison. She famously said, "Men go to bed with Gilda, but wake up with me," referring to her most famous role. The world's desire for her to remain an impossible fantasy prevented anyone from seeing or helping the traumatized woman beneath. 20. Lana Turner, the Sweater Girl's hidden fury. Lana Turner's discovery at a soda fountain became Hollywood legend, but her personal life was marked by violence, tragedy, and a cruelty born from desperation to maintain control in a chaotic world. Born to a father who was tragically taken from her when she was 9, and a mother who worked multiple jobs to survive, Turner learned early that beauty was her only weapon against poverty and powerlessness. Turner secretly funded a home for runaway teenage girls, perhaps recognizing herself in their desperation. She would visit regularly, bringing gifts and listening to their stories, never allowing publicity about these visits. Turner's cruelty was most evident in her treatment of her daughter Cheryl, whom she viewed simultaneously as a burden and a rival. When Cheryl defended herself against Turner's abusive boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, at age 14, Turner's primary concern was how the scandal would affect her career rather than her traumatized child. The moment that crystallized Turner's approach to relationships came when studio executives threatened to drop her contract if she gained weight. From that point forward, she viewed every person in her life as either an asset or a threat to her carefully maintained image. Her professional behavior revealed calculated cruelty designed to maintain her position. She would deliberately upstage co-stars, spread rumors about rivals, and manipulate directors through a combination of flirtation and intimidation. 19. Ava Gardner, the brutal beauty. Ava Gardner's stunning beauty and sultry persona made her one of Hollywood's most desired women, but those close to her discovered a deliberately cruel woman who used her appeal as a weapon and her wit as a blade. Born into crushing poverty in rural North Carolina, Gardner was discovered by MGM when her brother-in-law sent her photograph to the studio. Despite her reputation for cruelty, Gardner was known for her loyalty to longtime friends and her generosity toward people in need. She quietly supported numerous families during financial crises and often paid medical bills for aging actors who had no insurance. Gardner's cruelty was most evident in her romantic relationships, where she seemed to take pleasure in emotionally destroying men who fell in love with her. Her marriage to Mickey Rooney was marked by public humiliations. Her relationship with Frank Sinatra nearly drove him to attempt self-harm, and her affairs were calculated to inflict maximum damage on her partner's self-esteem. The source of Gardner's destructive behavior traced back to her first intimate experience, a traumatic assault by a family friend when she was 15. This trauma created a deep mistrust of men and a need to maintain power in relationships, even if it meant destroying the people she claimed to love. Her professional behavior was equally calculating. She would deliberately arrive late to keep entire productions waiting, knowing her star power made her irreplaceable. When working with female co-stars, she would monopolize the attention of male crew members, ensuring other women felt invisible and insecure. 18. Ginger Rogers, the Perfectionist's Revenge. While forever linked with Fred Astaire in the public imagination, Ginger Rogers' off-screen reputation was far removed from her elegant on-screen persona. Born to a mother who forced her into show business as a child, to escape poverty, Rogers learned that perfection was the only protection against being discarded. Her mother's constant criticism and impossible standards created a perfectionist who could never tolerate anything less than flawless performance from herself or others. Those who worked with her described a coldly calculating woman whose perfectionism manifested as deliberate cruelty toward anyone she felt was performing below her exacting standards. Surprisingly, Rogers was known for her private generosity toward dancers injured in her productions. She would personally pay for their medical treatment and often visited them during recovery. One former dancer noted, "She was ruthless about the work, but she took care of people like they were family." Rogers' most consistent targets were dancers and choreographers. She would deliberately humiliate core dancers who made minor mistakes, with numerous dancers breaking down in tears after Rogers' methodical public dissections of their technique. Even Fred Astaire, known for his professionalism and generally good relationships with co-stars, eventually requested not to work with Rogers again, despite their immense popularity as a duo. While publicly diplomatic, privately Astaire told friends that Rogers' treatment of crew members and supporting cast had become too difficult to witness. 17. Barbara Stanwick, the self-made survivor. Barbara Stanwyck's rise from poverty to Hollywood royalty created one of the industry's most complex personalities. Born Ruby Stevens in Brooklyn, she was orphaned at age 4 and spent her childhood being passed between relatives who saw her as a burden. At 14, she was working as a chorus girl to survive, learning that toughness was the only protection against exploitation. While renowned for her professionalism and work ethic, those who crossed her discovered what director Cecil B. DeMille called the most precisely vengeful woman I've ever encountered. Unlike stars born to privilege, Stanwyck's cruelty stemmed from a survival instinct developed during her brutal childhood in foster care. In stark contrast to her professional ruthlessness, Stanwyck was known for her extraordinary loyalty to longtime friends and crew members. She paid for several colleagues' children to attend college and quietly supported families during personal crises. Those who earned her trust found her fiercely protective. Stanwyck's method involved identifying others' professional vulnerabilities with uncanny accuracy, then exploiting them systematically. When a younger actress was cast alongside her in Double Indemnity, Stanwyck learned of her severe anxiety about memorizing lines. Rather than helping the newcomer, Stanwyck began requesting script changes minutes before their scenes together. The pivotal trauma that shaped Stanwyck's defensive nature occurred when she was 19, and her boyfriend convinced her to lend him her life savings, then disappeared with the money. She later said, "That was the last time I let anyone close enough to hurt me. After that, I made sure I always hurt them first." 16. Gloria Swanson, the silent era's surviving diva. Gloria Swanson successfully transitioned from silent films to talkies, but her longevity came at the cost of ruthless ambition that destroyed numerous careers and relationships. Born to a middle-class family that lost everything in the 1893 economic panic, Swanson learned early that security required constant vigilance against threats. In a touching contradiction to her imperious reputation, Swanson was known for her environmental activism and her work with disadvantaged children. She established organic farms decades before it became fashionable and regularly taught underprivileged children about healthy eating and sustainable living. Swanson's cruelty manifested in her systematic destruction of anyone who challenged her supremacy. When younger actresses were cast in roles she wanted, she would begin whisper campaigns about their personal lives, their professional competence, or their loyalty to the studio system. The defining moment of Swanson's career came when she was replaced as Paramount's top star by younger actresses. Her response was to become so difficult and demanding that it became easier for studios to give her what she wanted rather than fight her, establishing a template for aging stars to maintain relevance through intimidation. 15. Gene Tierney, The Beautiful Nightmare. Gene Tierney's extraordinary beauty and talent in films like Laura and Leave Her to Heaven masked what co-workers described as one of Hollywood's most unpredictable and deliberately vicious women. Born to wealthy parents who prioritized her appearance over her emotional well-being, Tierney was constantly told she was valued only for her beauty. While Tierney's later diagnosed bipolar disorder explains some of her volatility, colleagues consistently described calculated cruelty that went beyond mental health challenges. She would identify others' insecurities with remarkable precision, then exploit them in public settings designed to cause maximum humiliation. In her lucid moments, Tierney was known for her deep empathy and generosity. She quietly funded therapy for several crew members struggling with mental health issues, and often visited psychiatric facilities to comfort patients who had no other visitors. The tragedy that shattered Tierney's mental stability was learning that her daughter Daria's severe intellectual disabilities were caused by a fan with rubella who broke quarantine to meet her during pregnancy. The guilt of this indirect connection drove Tierney into a breakdown from which she never fully recovered. 14. Veronica Lake, the self-destructive hurricane. Veronica Lake's iconic peekaboo hairstyle and sultry persona made her one of the most recognizable stars of the 1940s, but her behind-the-scenes behavior earned her the nickname the Witch with the Peekaboo Bangs among industry insiders. Born Constance Bennett to a mother who suffered from severe mental illness, Lake's childhood was marked by constant instability and her mother's violent episodes. Lake's cruelty often stemmed from her alcoholism and untreated mental health issues. But even accounting for these challenges, colleagues described a deliberate meanness that went beyond her personal demons. She would memorize co-workers' insecurities and vulnerabilities, then exploit them publicly when she felt threatened or simply bored. In a tragic irony, Lake possessed extraordinary empathy for children and animals. She often brought stray animals to film sets and cared for them in her dressing room. When filming wrapped, she would personally find homes for each animal, sometimes driving hundreds of miles to ensure they went to loving families. The pivotal trauma that may have triggered Lake's self-destructive behavior occurred when her young son tragically drowned in a swimming pool accident. After this tragedy, friends noted that she seemed to punish herself and everyone around her, as if believing she deserved no happiness or kindness. 13. Carole Lombard. The screwball contradiction. Carole Lombard was beloved for her comedic talent and seemingly carefree personality, but those who worked closely with her discovered a woman whose humor often had a cruel edge and whose perfectionism bordered on obsession. Born Jane Peters to a mother who struggled financially after her husband's abandonment, Lombard learned that entertaining others was a survival mechanism. Lombard was known for her extraordinary generosity toward crew members and her loyalty to friends. She often threw elaborate parties for cast and crew at her own expense, and was one of the few stars who treated everyone on set with equal respect, regardless of their position. Her cruelty manifested primarily through her wit, which she wielded like a precision instrument to destroy anyone who bored or annoyed her. She had an uncanny ability to identify people's deepest insecurities and expose them through seemingly innocent jokes that left her targets devastated. The tragedy of Lombard's personality was that her humor was both her greatest gift and her most destructive weapon. She often used jokes to avoid serious, emotional conversations, leaving even close friends feeling that they never truly knew the real woman behind the performer. 12th, Hedy Lamar. The Beautiful Mind's Isolation. Hedy Lamar possessed both extraordinary beauty and a brilliant scientific mind, but the combination created a woman whose frustration with being valued only for her looks manifested as cold cruelty toward those who failed to recognize her intelligence. Born Hedwig Kiesler in Vienna to intellectual parents who fled Nazi persecution, Lamar's early trauma included witnessing the destruction of her cultured world. In stark contrast to her cold reputation, Lamar was known for her quiet philanthropy and her mentorship of young women interested in science and technology. She often used her own money to fund research projects and scholarships for female students in technical fields. Lamar's cruelty was most evident in her treatment of people who treated her as merely decorative. She would systematically humiliate men who assumed she was intellectually inferior, often using her scientific knowledge to expose their ignorance in front of others. The source of Lamar's defensive cruelty was her frustration with being trapped in a beautiful body that prevented people from taking her mind seriously. She once said, "Any girl can be glamorous. All you have to do is stand still and look stupid." 11. Jean Arthur, the Anxious Perfectionist. Jean Arthur's screen persona as the warm, funny girl with the distinctive voice stands in stark contrast to what director Frank Capra called the most genuinely difficult human being I ever worked with. Born Gladys Green to parents who constantly criticized her appearance and demeanor, Arthur developed severe social anxiety and a pathological fear of being judged. Arthur's extreme anxiety and pathological perfectionism manifested as systematic cruelty toward those she felt were compromising her performances. Unlike stars whose difficult behavior stemmed from ego, Arthur's came from a crippling fear of imperfection that she projected onto others through calculated control mechanisms. In a touching contradiction to her professional behavior, Arthur was known for her kindness to children and animals. She often brought her own pets to comfort child actors on set and would spend hours patiently helping young performers overcome their nervousness. The trauma that triggered Arthur's perfectionist anxiety occurred during her first major stage performance, when she forgot her lines and was booed off stage. The humiliation was so complete that she vowed never again to be vulnerable to failure, even if it meant destroying others to protect herself. 10. Mary Astor, the Diary Deployer. Mary Astor is remembered for her Oscar-winning performance in The Maltese Falcon, but in Hollywood circles, she was known for wielding secrets as weapons and destroying reputations with surgical precision. Born to parents who forced her into acting as a child to pay their debts. Astor never experienced a normal childhood and learned early that information was power. Astor became infamous for keeping detailed diaries of her affairs and the private confessions of friends, then strategically deploying this information when it benefited her. While her own diary became public during a custody battle, revealing affairs with numerous prominent men, few knew that Astor maintained separate collection diaries about others. In a touching contradiction to her manipulative reputation, Astor was known for her extraordinary kindness to elderly actors who had fallen on hard times. She secretly provided housing and financial support to numerous forgotten performers, often visiting them regularly until their passing. The moment that shaped Astor's approach to relationships occurred when she confided her deepest secrets to a trusted friend, only to see them published in a gossip column the next week. She vowed never again to be the victim of betrayal, writing, "If I must live among vipers, I will become the most venomous of all." 9. Ethel Barrymore, The Theatre Royal's Revenge. As a member of America's most distinguished theatrical family, Ethel Barrymore brought to Hollywood not just exceptional talent, but what colleagues called the most refined cruelty in the business. An aristocratic approach to psychological warfare that left lasting scars. Born into the legendary Barrymore dynasty, she grew up believing that theatrical excellence was a birthright that lesser mortals could never achieve. Unlike stars who rose from nothing, Barrymore's cruelty stemmed from a sense of theatrical royalty. She viewed most Hollywood actors as inherently inferior to those with stage training, and her methodical humiliation of film actors often focused on their perceived technical deficiencies. Barrymore would deliberately undermine less experienced actors through a technique contemporaries called the royal displacement. During rehearsals, she would practice one approach to a scene, establishing a rhythm her co-stars adjusted to. Then during actual filming, she would completely change her timing, emotional level, and sometimes even rephrase her dialogue. 8. Talula Bankhead, The Equal Opportunity Tormentor. Talula Bankhead's acerbic wit and outrageous behavior made her a Hollywood legend, but also one of its most feared figures. Born into Southern aristocracy, but losing her mother when she was just 3 weeks old, Bankhead learned early that outrageous behavior was the only way to capture attention in a household where she felt invisible among her father's political ambitions. Her cruelty was democratic. She targeted everyone from stagehands to leading men with her vicious barbs and deliberate humiliations. Bankhead's weapon of choice was public embarrassment. She would interrupt scenes to loudly criticize other actors' techniques or appearance, often using explicit language that shocked even hardened film crews. Behind the cruel facade, Bankhead was extraordinarily generous to those in need. She supported numerous families during the Depression, paid for strangers' medical treatments, and once gave away her entire wardrobe to women fleeing abusive relationships. She never publicized these acts, claiming, "Charity is for private consumption, darling." The contradiction in Bankhead's personality became clear during World War II, when she exhausted herself performing for troops overseas. A fellow entertainer noted, "On stage, she was pure love and generosity. Off stage, she seemed to punish herself and everyone else for caring so much." 7. June Allyson, The Two-Faced Terror. June Allyson cultivated one of Hollywood's greatest disconnects between public image and private reality. While audiences adored her as the wholesome girl next door, those who worked with her encountered what director David Miller called the most skillfully cruel woman I've ever met in the film business. Born to an alcoholic father who broke her skull in a drunken rage when she was 8 months old, leaving her partially deaf, Allyson learned early that survival required creating a perfect facade to hide the chaos beneath. Allyson's technique involved maintaining her sweet persona in public settings while engaging in psychological warfare behind closed doors. Film crews recalled her smiling warmly for publicity photos, then turning to verbally eviscerate support staff the moment cameras stopped rolling. In a stunning contradiction to her cruel reputation, Allyson secretly supported numerous children's charities and was known to spend her personal time reading to hospitalized children. She insisted on anonymity for these visits, claiming that sick children deserved genuine care, not publicity stunts. The moment that crystallized Allyson's split personality came when she was told by a studio executive that her natural personality was too aggressive for audiences. From that day forward, she consciously constructed a sweet public persona while allowing her anger and cruelty to manifest only in private settings. 6. Susan Hayward, the fiery-tempered redhead. Susan Hayward's explosive temper and vindictive streaks were as fiery as her famous red hair. Born into crushing poverty in Brooklyn, Hayward's childhood was marked by her father's alcoholism and violent outbursts. She learned early that survival meant fighting for everything, a lesson that would define her approach to Hollywood. Known for melodramatic roles that often won her critical acclaim, Hayward brought that same intense drama to her off-screen relationships. Crews dreaded working with Hayward due to her unpredictable outbursts. She would throw props, scream at directors, and deliberately sabotage takes if she felt slighted in any way. Despite her reputation for cruelty, Hayward was known to sit vigil at the hospital bedside of seriously ill crew members, sometimes for days. When a stunt woman was paralyzed in an accident on one of her films, Hayward personally covered all her medical expenses and visited her weekly for years. The trauma that shaped Hayward's defensive nature reached its peak when she was diagnosed with a brain tumor in 1972. Facing her own mortality, she finally revealed to a close friend the source of her anger. "I was so afraid of being hurt that I hurt everyone first. I thought if I was mean enough, no one could abandon me like my father did." 5. Loretta Young, the sanctimonious tyrant. Loretta Young's public image as a devout Catholic and moral exemplar stood in the stark contrast to her treatment of those she worked with. Born to a mother who struggled to raise 4 children alone after her husband's abandonment, Young learned early that appearing morally superior was a survival mechanism in a judgmental world. Behind her pious exterior lurked what one director called the meanest woman in Hollywood when she doesn't get exactly what she wants. Young's particular brand of cruelty combined sanctimony with vindictiveness. She famously maintained a swear box on her sets, fining anyone who used profanity, but collected fines selectively, targeting people she disliked, while ignoring violations from those she favored. Paradoxically, Young was known for her genuine acts of charity, establishing a foundation for unwed mothers and personally caring for several disabled children. Friends noted that she seemed to need public recognition for her good deeds as much as she feared exposure of her cruelty. Young's cruelty extended to family matters. When her daughter, Judy Lewis, conceived out of wedlock with Clark Gable but presented to the world as adopted, began questioning her parentage, Young responded with emotional manipulation and gaslighting, refusing to acknowledge the truth even as Judy recognized her resemblance to Gable. Zsa Zsa Gabor, the status-obsessed socialite. Zsa Zsa Gabor's fame derived more from her flamboyant personality and 9 marriages than her acting career, but her reputation for calculated cruelty made her one of Hollywood's most feared social figures for decades. Born in Budapest to a mother who constantly compared her unfavorably to her sisters, Gabor learned that creating drama and commanding attention were the only ways to feel valued. Gabor's particular brand of cruelty focused on social status and class distinctions. She would invite people from different social circles to the same event, then deliberately highlight their differences in ways designed to humiliate those she considered inferior. Despite her reputation for snobbery, Gabor was known to quietly help Hungarian refugees settle in America, often providing them with housing and job connections. She never publicized this assistance, perhaps because it contradicted her carefully cultivated image of superficial self-absorption. The trauma that shaped Gabor's obsession with status occurred during World War II, when her family lost everything during the Nazi occupation. She later confided to a friend, "When you've had nothing, when you've been treated like nothing, you never stop fighting to prove you're something." 3. Pette Goddard, the Machiavellian manipulator. Pette Goddard's beautiful face masked one of Hollywood's most calculating minds. Born into poverty as Miriam Leigh, she was forced to work as a child model to help support her family after her father abandoned them. This early experience of being judged solely on appearance taught her that beauty was a weapon that could be strategically deployed for survival. Her rise from Ziegfeld girl to major star wasn't just due to her talent. It was the result of a ruthlessly strategic approach to relationships that left numerous casualties in its wake. Goddard's cruelty manifested differently than some of Hollywood's more publicly volatile stars. Rather than explosive outbursts, she specialized in behind-the-scenes manipulation and carefully planned social sabotage. Despite her calculating nature, Goddard had a secret soft spot for animals and disadvantaged children. She anonymously funded a shelter for stray cats and regularly visited orphanages, often bringing elaborate gifts. When asked why she kept these visits secret, she reportedly said, "Some things are too pure for publicity." The defining moment in Goddard's approach to relationships came when her first serious boyfriend left her for another woman when she was 19. She confided to her diary, "I will never again give anyone the power to discard me. From now on, I will be the one who leaves." 2. Constance Bennett, the calculated class warrior. Constance Bennett was Hollywood royalty who never let anyone forget it. Born into the famous Bennett acting family, she lived in constant competition with her sisters Joan and Barbara, developing an early belief that she had to be ruthless to survive in a family where love seemed contingent on professional success. As the highest paid actress in Hollywood during the 1930s, she commanded substantial salaries at her peak, and her attitude matched her status. Bennett was notorious for her deliberate cruelty to crew members whom she considered beneath her notice. She would refuse to learn their names, instead snapping her fingers and pointing when she wanted something. However, Bennett's private behavior told a different story. She quietly paid medical bills for crew members injured on set and anonymously funded Christmas bonuses for studio workers during the Depression. Her housekeeper of 20 years later revealed that Bennett insisted on personally cooking Thanksgiving dinner for any employee who had nowhere else to go. The pivotal moment that hardened Bennett's heart came when she was passed over for a major role in favor of a younger actress, despite being more qualified. That night, she wrote in her diary, "If they want monsters, I'll give them monsters. Kindness is a luxury I can no longer afford." 1. Miriam Hopkins, the scene-stealing saboteur. Miriam Hopkins may not be as well remembered today as some of her contemporaries, but in Hollywood's golden age, she was infamous for her ruthless scene-stealing tactics and explosive jealousy toward co-stars. Born into poverty in Georgia, Hopkins endured a childhood marked by her father's abandonment when she was just 5 years old, leaving her mother to struggle alone with 4 children. Director William Wyler, who worked with Hopkins on These Three and The Children's Hour, described her as terribly difficult to work with. Despite her reputation for cruelty, Hopkins secretly maintained a scholarship fund for young actresses from poor backgrounds, anonymously paying for their acting lessons and living expenses. Her reputation for sabotaging other actresses became so notorious that many top stars refused to work with her. Hopkins' most legendary feud was with Bette Davis, with whom she made 2 films. During the production of The Old Maid, Hopkins deliberately tried to upstage Davis by moving around during Davis's close-ups, forcing retakes, and trying to distract from her co-star's performance. The irony of Hopkins' competitive nature was that it stemmed from deep insecurity about her own talent. In private letters to her sister, she confessed feeling like a fraud who didn't deserve success, writing, "Every day I expect them to discover I can't really act and send me back to Georgia." Hopkins was also known for demanding extensive rewrites to give herself more lines and better scenes, often at the expense of her co-stars. Her jealousy was so intense that when she believed a colleague was receiving more attention or better lighting, she would reportedly throw tantrums that could shut down production for hours. These stories remind us that behind every perfect Hollywood image was a human being struggling with their own demons. Some channeled their pain into incredible performances, while others let it poison their relationships and careers. The golden age of Hollywood gave us timeless films and unforgettable stars, but it also created a system that often damaged the very people it was supposed to celebrate. Don't forget to like this video if it opened your eyes to a different side of classic Hollywood, and subscribe for more deep dives into film history's most intriguing mysteries. Which of these stories hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments. Till next time, keep watching and keep discovering the stories behind the stories.